Hello, class. We're going to continue the stats lecture in section 2.1 and talk about bar graphs and pie charts. These are probably the two most popular and probably most useful way to display the data. So what we're going to do is I'll show you kind of how to do it by hand, sort of using PowerPoints, right? But then show you how to use the spreadsheet with the data that we used in the last lecture as well. Well, to do it by hand, let's go back to the credit card data that we collected where we had 50 customers and these were the credit cards that were used. And we did the relative and the frequency and the relative frequency. When you do a bar graph or a pie chart, you could graph either the relative frequency, as you can see there on the right, or the frequency that you can see there on the left. And so a couple of things to think about is the horizontal or x-axis is typically the categories. And the y-axis or the vertical axis is the frequency or relative frequency with regards to that. And what's nice about a bar graph is that you could really see the differences between each category displayed graphically. I find it to be quite useful. This Pareto chart gives you the same data, but it goes from biggest to smallest. I don't find this very useful, but you see this in every stats book, so I thought I'd mention it real quick. The other one that could be useful is taking the bar graph and turn it horizontal. This might make it useful when you're doing a presentation. And again, you're trying to put some information together. You can see in a horizontal view like this, you could have a lot longer categories that are easier to read. So depending on how your data is being categorized, this might be a useful tool. And the other one that actually is quite useful is these side-by-side charts. In the business world, it becomes very useful. You could take your sales data per year and kind of put a side-by-side chart, see what happens either monthly, quarterly, or yearly with regard to that. You could check your cost out. You could check the number of customers you have every month and how it's been increasing or decreasing, et cetera. So this becomes a very useful tool. Now to do this with the spreadsheet, here's the data that we had on the height of the boys. And here we have 35 boys that were sampled. So the idea of generating any chart is the first thing you want to do is you highlight the data. So what I'm doing, I use a mouse, so I click and hold that down and highlight the data. And then you come up and you hit insert. And you see in the middle here, you should see a bunch of possible charts. And it's kind of weird because if you click the recommended charts, which I highly suggest that you do, you can see this is what Excel thinks would display the data the best. And you can see the first one is typically going to be a bar chart, which is cool. And this one's already set up. And you can see they have weird names. This one's called cluster column. So you could always search for that with regards to that. You can see that the second one here gives you the horizontal version. We don't really need that in this case because our categories are numbers, so they're nice and small. So I prefer looking at it in the vertical aspect of it. So a couple things about formatting that I will point out. Number one, if you click this plus sign here, it'll give you a chance to add or change things. And one thing is you could add axis titles where you could just type them in. You could add the data labels on the top, which is kind of nice. You'll see that when we do the pie chart, I find that to be much more useful with regard to that as well. And you could do a bunch of other stuff, even add a trend line, which we're going to talk about in chapter 4. The other one that is very useful is this hourglass. And here, if the data is not set up correctly, here's how you fix it. This one is set up correctly. I have it set up where when we do the pie chart, I will show you how to do this, where you hit select data and you switch these categories. Here, the horizontal is this column, which is great because that's what our categories are. And here are the vertical, which is the series here. That is our frequency. So that turned out to work out well. And so the next one that we'll talk about now is the pie chart. And the pie chart is set up where the pie is all the data. So 100% of the data is inside the pie. So in this case, what we're displaying here is the relative frequency. So if you add all those up, it will add up to 1. If you did the frequency, the pie would be 50 credit cards, right? And that would be the total. And the pie always is the total data that we're dealing with. And so in this case, the bigger the pie slice, the more is in that particular slice, of course. And you can see the Visa is the biggest one, almost 50% or 0.46 with regards to that. And so to generate a pie chart using a Excel spreadsheet, let me show you how to do that. So same strategy here. Click on my mouse, hold it down, and highlight the columns that we want to display. And then you hit Insert, and you can see here's a little pie, so it's Insert Pie or Donut Chart. So if you click on that, you could do 2D pie, 3D pie, or donut. Let's just do the 2D pie. And when you click on that, it's like, it doesn't look right. And you're right, it doesn't look right. And that's because the data is not set up correctly. So what you want is that when it looks like that, you click on the chart filter and you hit select data. And you can see that the horizontal or the axis is actually the B column, which is the frequency. And so it's flip-flopped. What we want to do is over here, what we want inside the pie is the frequency. So let's turn off the age. And what we want to delineate each pie is actually the ages of boy. So you want to edit this. You don't want it to be 1, 2, 5, etc. You want it to be 10 through 18. So I click on that and highlight the new data that we want to put in there and hit OK and hit OK. And now you can see that our pie chart looks the way we thought it would look. Or you could see the 14 is the biggest one, and that should have 9 in it, right? And you could see that when you add all this up, you would get 50. And we could have done the same thing for the relative frequency, but I kind of showed you that in the PowerPoint presentation. The other thing I just want to point out is you hit the plus. What I like to do on a pie chart is to add the numbers inside the pie. And the spreadsheet will do that for you by clicking the data labels. And so you can see all the numbers with regards to that as well, which gives a nice feel for what's happening. So that ends the section 2.1, and again, focusing on bar charts in this lecture and pie charts.